obviously a quote from Michael Pollan, which I think is quite relevant to us all, and that we are obviously at once the problem and the only possible solution to the problem as well. So we talk about children. So I think for me that's a part where I've been trying to work on as a chef. Our industry at the moment is quite severely understaffed. There's quite a severe skill shortage. So my, I guess, take on it is twofold, because for me it's about educating children about food. I'm very lucky. I grew up in New Zealand, surrounded by amazing scenery, but also, we had a veggie garden in the backyard, so we'd go out and pick our salad, our courgettes for dinner. So I was very privileged that I understand where food came from and how it gets to my plate or into my kitchen even. And I think on the other side of that, it's about me trying to inspire young children that actually being a chef is a really cool and rewarding and interesting and satisfying career path. So that's kind of where I come from. I've had a couple of sessions at my restaurant, and I also work with some other third parties in terms of getting in front of children. And I think one of the first things that I always talk to them is about seasons, and say, right, do you know what a season is? And they all say yes, it's a season. So right, tell me about something you ate in summer. Tell me about that. It's all, ice cream is probably the one that comes up the most, but strawberries, interestingly, is also a really common one. So we go through that, we talk about that. I have a little show and tell of different things which they may have seen, they may not have seen. Recently I did one where we kind of tried to, replicate pulling vegetables out of the ground, so pulling the carrots out, pulling the spring onions, and interestingly some of them didn't know what the carrot was that was purple, so it would be purple carrots, yellow carrots, orange carrots, and some of them didn't actually understand what this purple carrot was, despite the fact that it looked exactly the same as the orange one. We move on to taste as well, so trying to get them just to understand those certain elements of taste. And again, I'll pass around little tidbits of things to try and say, what does that taste like to you? And interestingly, of course, their palates are different. Some of them will try things, some of them won't try things, but on the whole, I also feel that having somebody that's not in their immediate vicinity, their family, their school, coming in and talking to them about it, they're a lot more receptive about it as well, and a bit more receptive to try new things. Flavour and smell, a huge one obviously. Smell it first, then taste it. Taste it with your, with the blocked nose and see how it tastes. And then descriptors too, so I think also, how we talk about food, is it something that can be, textures as well is a huge one. So I think that's a really important one. So that's kind of a speeding through that in terms of education with children, because from my perspective, there's a lot of children in the UK especially that kind of think, I heard a story recently where a child thought potato came from the freezer because it was a chip that came from the freezer. Didn't actually understand where it came from and also how to then influence it. And obviously, as referring back to Connor's point, what do you do if you chip that potato in with the peelings, for instance? And there's always a way to be able to use them. So moving on to also, I guess, plant-based eating, which is something I'm quite passionate about, more in terms of, I also I cook everything, fish, meat, dairy, I love it all, but I think we all need to kind of understand how we can eat more plants, basically, at the end of the day, and try to do that. I think the language around vegan versus plant-based is something that I talk a lot about. I don't often use the word vegan. I've got a plant-based cookbook, and I fought with my publisher, but they won and put the word vegan on the front. But for me, I think it's something, vegan is a lifestyle, whereas plant-based is about what is on your plate and how you eat. And I think that language needs a bit of adjusting in there as well. Obviously, meat versus plants, I'm a chef, I understand how to cook something, I understand how to get the most out of something. I will take time to roast my courgettes to get that caramelization on them, whereas a lot of people don't necessarily do that. And I always give the example that you would never steam a steak and eat it because it would be revolting. But we think nothing of steaming cauliflower and putting it on our children's plate to eat. And so I think, again, just putting them on an equal kind of pedestal that actually you can get as much deliciousness out of a vegetable as you can out of meat. Perception is a huge one as well. I think, I do two tasting menus at my restaurant. One is plant-based, one is not. And just interestingly, some people get kind of dragged by their other halves to have this plant-based tasting menu, and when I talked to them afterwards, their initial thought was they're going to have to go and get a kebab on the way home because they're going to be hungry. And they're actually quite often surprised at how satiating and how delicious it can be without having to use weight. So again, I think the perception around it is really important. And again, cooking, because there's so many people that don't necessarily understand, as I said before, how to get the best out of the vegetables. If we think of an onion, which is the base of probably almost all cuisines around the world, it's in all the stocks, it's in all the sauces in French classical cookery. You know, it's something that you can get so much flavour from, yet just takes a little bit of time to be able to do it. And I think that's, again, understanding that perception of how we can engage. And actually, just as an aside, these really cool drawings, illustrations on my slides are actually by one of my team. She actually works in my bar, but she's also an illustrator. And we put these on, I do little recipe cards for children when they come, because we also do a children's tasting menu at the restaurant as well. So they can also go on that journey with their parents and try something different. So I guess thoughts to kind of sum things up. Obviously some of us are aware of the Planetary Health Diet, also obviously the Eat Lancet, which a group of us were in Stockholm for a couple of weeks ago, and how that can kind of come about in day-to-day life. And there's kind of outrage from some sides on it, and embracing from other sides. And I think again, just actually looking at how we eat, and as Paula said, what we actually classify as waste, which isn't waste. Surplus versus waste are two very different things. And I think looking at what Connor does is incredible, and it's really inspiring even for me as a chef. And I think, as Connor said, with chefs, we don't waste. We can't afford to waste because our restaurants wouldn't run if we did. We wouldn't meet our GPs, we wouldn't be able to actually pay our rent. So we kind of take it as a given, but I think there's a lot more that can be done in the wider world. Obviously, one of the most important things about all of this is taste and flavour. Food has to be delicious. It can be as good for us as anything. It can be as amazing for the planet. But if it doesn't taste good, if we don't understand how to get the best out of it, how to cook it to the best way, in the best way, then we're not going to probably be able to move forward. And changing the norms and perception change, I think, is what we are all, I think it's what Stockholm was a lot about at the Eat Forum, and actually how changing that norm, changing that perception that we must have meat and free veg on our plate. Why can't it be the free veg is the heroes, and then you've got the garnish of the meat, so reversing the psychology and the perception of it. And at the end of the day, just ensuring that, again, it comes back to the education of how we can educate the youth of today. As Connor was saying, it's up to us to be able to inspire them, to educate them, to be able to know more about flavour, about taste, where food comes from, and also how to cook it and get the best out of it. So that is my flyby summary, and I hope everyone can take something from that.